Whispers beneath the willow. The train rolled into the small station with a groan of brakes and a hiss of steam, and Eleanor Hartley felt her chest tighten. It had been 40 years since she'd last stepped onto these worn wooden planks. The world outside her window was familiar and foreign all at once. The lake still shimmered beyond the ridge, the willow trees still bent toward the water, but the town had aged just as she had. She gathered her bags with careful fingers. At 63, she moved slower than she once had, though her frame was still tall, her silver hair pinned neatly at her nape. She had returned not in triumph, not in the swirl of youthful dreams, but because her life elsewhere had dissolved. After her husband's passing 2 winters ago, the house they had shared in Chicago felt unbearably empty. Her daughter urged her to move closer, but something in Eleanor resisted. Instead, she'd sold the house and come back here to the town where she'd first learned the shape of love, and the shape of regret. The taxi carried her through narrow streets lined with clapboard houses and maples turning red at the edges. Memories clung to each corner: the diner where she and her friends drank milkshakes after school, the library where she'd hidden in books, the quiet lane where she'd walked hand in hand with a boy whose absence had haunted her life ever since. She shook herself. That was decades ago. The past could not be rewritten. She had come only for peace, for painting, for solitude. Her small rented cottage overlooked the lake, and when she unlocked the door she let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. Dust sheets draped over the furniture, but the windows opened onto the water, and across the shimmering surface she could see it, the willow tree. It leaned as it always had, its branches trailing like fingertips into the lake. Beneath that tree she had first been kissed. Beneath that tree she had promised forever to a boy named Michael. And beneath that tree she had broken his heart when life pulled her away. Now the willow was only a tree, she told herself. The past was only memory. She would paint, and perhaps in quiet brushstrokes she would find herself again. Yet as she stood at the window, the years folded in, and the ache of unfinished love stirred like an ember in her chest. The library smelled the same: leather, dust, and the faint sweetness of polished wood. Eleanor had come in search of a sketchbook, though part of her knew she was seeking something less tangible, perhaps the comfort of shelves lined with stories when her own life felt unwritten. She wandered the aisles slowly, fingers trailing spines, until she reached the poetry section. She pulled down a volume of Yeats, the same one she had borrowed as a teenager, and when she turned, her breath caught. Michael Whitaker stood at the end of the aisle. For a heartbeat she thought her mind had conjured him, that memory had taken shape. But no, here he was, real, solid, older but unmistakable. His hair had thinned and turned white, his shoulders stooped slightly, but his eyes, those same steady blue eyes, widened in recognition. "Eleanor," he said, and her name on his lips sounded both foreign and achingly right. She managed a nod. "Michael, it's been a long time." 40 years, he said softly. His voice was deeper now, roughened with age, yet it carried the same gentle cadence she remembered from late-night talks under the willow. She wanted to smile, to summon some lightness, but her throat tightened. "You stayed," she said instead, gesturing vaguely around the library. He nodded. "Taught literature here for 35 years. Retired last spring, but I can't seem to stay away from the books." He gave a half-smile that still had the power to disarm her. "And you? I heard you went to the city." "I did," she admitted. "Life took me there. Marriage, family, work. And now, it brought me back." Silence settled between them, thick with years unsaid. She felt the old ache rise, the questions of what might have been if she had chosen differently, if she had stayed. But she would not burden him with regret. He had surely built a life as she had. Michael cleared his throat. "There's a cafe across the street. Would you join me for a cup of tea? To catch up?" Eleanor hesitated. Part of her longed to flee, to guard the fragile cocoon she had spun around her grief and solitude. Yet another part, the younger, braver part of her, urged her forward. "Yes," she said at last, her voice barely above a whisper. I'd like that. As they walked side by side into the golden afternoon, Eleanor felt the ground tilt beneath her. She had come home seeking quiet. Instead, she had stumbled into the echo of a love she thought lost forever. The cafe was nearly empty, the hum of the espresso machine filling the quiet. They chose a small table near the window where autumn light slanted in, catching dust motes that drifted like golden snow. Michael ordered Earl Grey, Eleanor a chamomile. For a moment they sat in silence, both stirring their cups though neither needed sweetening. It feels strange, Eleanor said at last, sitting here with you after so many years. Like no time has passed at all, and yet, a lifetime has. Michael's smile was tinged with sadness. A lifetime, yes. I used to wonder what became of you. Sometimes I'd see your name in the alumni bulletin. Married. Moved away. Children. She looked down at her tea. And you? He shrugged lightly. I stayed. Taught, wrote a little. Married once, briefly, but it didn't last. No children. Mostly, it was books and students. And the lake. His words hung between them, simple and heavy. She remembered the day she'd left, a scholarship in hand, her parents' encouragement, her own restless hunger for a bigger life. Michael had begged her to stay, or at least to promise she'd return. But she had been 18, her heart torn between dreams and love, and in the end, ambition had won. She had written letters at first, then fewer, then none. I should have written, she whispered. Michael shook his head. We were young. You wanted more than this town could give. I can't fault you for that. But I hurt you. His gaze met hers steadily. Yes, but life hurts us all one way or another. I've had 40 years to learn that. She swallowed hard. The ache of regret throbbed in her chest, but beneath it flickered something else, relief. He was here. He did not hate her. He had carried on. And now, somehow they sat together again. Their conversation stretched, first tentative, then warmer. They spoke of books, of music, of the changes in town. Eleanor found herself laughing at his dry humor, remembering the way he once teased her about her seriousness. For a moment, she felt like the girl she had been, except now tempered by all she had lived through. When they finally rose to leave, twilight had painted the sky lavender. Michael walked her to her cottage door. They paused, uncertain, as if teetering on the edge of something fragile. It's good to see you again, Eleanor, he said softly. She touched his hand just briefly. It's good to see you too. And when she closed the door, she leaned against it, her heart fluttering with a mixture of fear and wonder. In the days that followed, their paths crossed more often. At first by chance, in the market, on the lakeside trail, in the library. Then by intention. Michael began stopping by her cottage with books he thought she'd enjoy, and Eleanor invited him in for tea, her sketches spread across the table. They walked together along the lake, their conversations winding like the path itself. They spoke of trivial things, the best place to watch the sunset, the antics of neighborhood dogs, and of heavier ones too. Eleanor told him of her husband's long illness, of the silence that followed his death. Michael shared the loneliness of his retirement, the way his classroom echoes had not quite faded. Sometimes they sat beneath the willow tree, its branches whispering in the breeze, and memory pressed close. Eleanor remembered stolen kisses, promises whispered against bark and water. Michael remembered her laughter, the way her hair caught the light. One evening, as dusk fell, Eleanor sketched the willow while Michael watched the lake. He said quietly, I never stopped coming here. It was always ours in a way, even when you were gone. She looked up from her sketch pad, her throat tight. And I never stopped carrying you with me, even when I pretended otherwise. Silence stretched, filled only by the lapping water. Michael turned to her, his face lined with years but his eyes alight. For a moment she thought he might reach for her, but instead he smiled faintly. It seems we've both been haunted. That night Eleanor lay awake, staring at the ceiling. She had not expected this stirring in her chest, this warmth she had long thought extinguished. She was 63, not a girl anymore. Could love bloom again after so much time? The next day, Michael brought her a book of poetry. Inside, tucked between the pages, was a pressed flower, faded, fragile, yet still holding its shape. "I found it in an old journal," he said, a touch of embarrassment in his tone. "From the day we sat under the willow reading Yeats. Do you remember?" Eleanor traced the petals with trembling fingers. "I remember everything." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, a recognition, a possibility. For the first time in decades, Eleanor felt not just alive but awake. The weeks drifted into rhythm. Afternoons by the willow, evenings with tea and conversation, occasional dinners at the cafe. Eleanor felt herself softening, as if layers of grief and regret were peeling away. With Michael she did not have to pretend. Yet life, as always, complicated things. One crisp morning, Eleanor's daughter Clara called from Paris. Clara was a journalist, constantly moving, always urging her mother to join her adventures. "Mom, listen," Clara said, her voice bright. "There's an apartment opening near me. It's small but charming. You could come stay with me, really start fresh. You'd love it here." Eleanor's heart lurched. Paris. The dream she had once chased in her youth, the city of art and light. And Clara's voice was pleading, full of love. "I'll think about it," Eleanor said, though the words tasted uncertain. That evening she told Michael. They were walking by the lake, the air scented with pine. His steps slowed. "Paris?" he repeated quietly. "It's only a thought," Eleanor said quickly. "Clara wants me close. She worries I'll be lonely here." Michael looked out over the water. "And would you be lonely?" She hesitated. "Not when I'm with you." The silence that followed was heavy. Finally he nodded. "I can't ask you to stay, Eleanor. Not after last time. If Paris is what you want." His voice trailed off, but the unfinished words cut her. "If Paris is what you want, you'll go. And I'll lose you again." That night Eleanor sat by her easel, staring at the half-finished sketch of the willow. Her heart pulled in two directions, toward her daughter, toward the man whose presence felt like home. She had spent her life choosing paths, and always one thing was lost when another was gained. Could she risk choosing love again? 2 days later, she asked Michael to meet her by the willow. The branches swayed, whispering as though they too awaited her choice. "I wanted to explain," Eleanor began, her voice trembling. "When Clara asked me to come, a part of me wanted to say yes. Paris has always been a dream. But then I realized, dreams change. What I want now isn't a city or adventure. It's," she faltered, then met his eyes. "It's you. It's this. Here." Michael's breath caught. He took a step closer, then another, until he stood before her. "Eleanor, are you certain? I don't want to hold you back." She smiled through sudden tears. "You're not holding me back. You're holding me here where I belong." And for the first time in 4 decades, their lips met again beneath the willow. The kiss was not the fiery rush of youth but something deeper, steadier, a promise born not of naive hope but of everything they had endured apart. Michael pulled back, his hand still holding hers. "Then let's not waste another day." She nodded, laughter breaking through her tears. "No more wasted days." The willow rustled as though in agreement, its branches arching over them like a benediction. Spring came early that year. The lake thawed, wildflowers pushed through damp earth, and beneath the willow, Eleanor set up her easel. Her sketches had grown bolder, brighter, infused with a joy she thought she had lost forever. Michael sat nearby with a book, occasionally glancing up to watch her work. Sometimes he read aloud, sometimes he simply listened to the birdsong and the scratch of her pencil. They were not young anymore. Their hair was silver, their steps slower. But love, they discovered, was not only for the young. It was for anyone brave enough to open their heart, even after loss, even after time. One afternoon Clara visited, curious about this man her mother spoke of. She watched the way Eleanor's eyes softened when Michael entered the room, the way his hand brushed hers without thought. Later, Clara whispered to her mother, "I've never seen you so alive." Eleanor only smiled. Beneath the willow they found not what they had lost, but what they had gained. A love tempered by years, tender and unshakable. Not a beginning, not an ending, but a second bloom, one that would last until the last light faded across the lake. And when the branches whispered overhead, Eleanor could almost hear their younger selves laughing, promising forever. This time she believed it,